Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the December session of Discover Dorico. Um, Today, as somebody's just commented, we're going to a preview today. No previews today. Today, after comments from Facebook and email and various other things, what we're going to be looking at is lots of things in play mode. And other play related things. So from Facebook, I had some emails, and also I recently visited the London Composers Forum, and there's some questions that came up from there as well about various play options. So today, what we're going to do is look at some play preferences things, some play shortcuts, some mixer stuff, some effects, some play mode options, some VST rack things, and things to do with sample libraries and expression maps. So at some point, I hope I don't lose anybody, but hopefully at some point there'll be things that you'll get out of it, even if you just want to use all the basic stuff. And if you actually want to use anything further and expand on things a bit more with sample libraries, then you can do that too. So I'm aiming this so that everybody can follow it, and of course, it being a video and it'll be on YouTube afterwards, you can go back and go, what did he say? What was he showing? And hopefully follow all of these. So let's look at some of these options. I'm going to start with a new project again, as I often do. This for anybody who's watching this in the future, this is version 1.2 that I'm using. So if you're using 1.2, you'll be able to do this stuff at least at the beginning that I'm going to be doing. One of the differences which might have got missed if you've done one of the updates recently is some of the differences with players. So normally I add a solo player and I press Shift P and I add a solo player, like a violin, for example, and I get a solo player up here on the left, and that's my violin. Now there was always been a button, and that center section that was there a second ago, which said add a section player, and I often didn't use it. Now there is more of a point of doing it. So there's of course an add section player option at the bottom here as well, or of course I'll use a shortcut. So it's Shift Alt P instead of just Shift P. And so now if I add a violin from there, then I have a violin solo and a violin section. There is a point to this, bear with me. So I'm also going to add a trumpet. So I'm adding a solo trumpet, and let's add a section trumpet. Hopefully you'll see from the shortcuts, apart from of course when I type a word, you'll see from the shortcuts what I'm using for those. So Shift P is add your solo, Shift Alt P is add your section, but why would you bother? So the answer is that now in 1.2, when you're adding adding notes to these, and I'll add some for the other violin, you'll get different sounds for the solo and the section instruments. So there's a very exciting piece of C. So the solo violin. And you get a different sound for the section player. They don't display anything different over here, but one is I created it as a section player, and as we said, in setup mode on the left-hand side here, you can see the difference was whether it's a section player or a solo. And of course, the difference basically is that your solo player might double on another instrument, and therefore be a different sound, whereas the section player is more likely to be a trumpet section or a first violin desk, for example. So you'd have a different sound for that one, and Dorico will pick that up for you automatically. Now, later on, we'll look at how you could change that and tweak that, and how you want to change it in some of your existing scores, and other options you might want to look at. So we'll do some of those a bit later on, but just so you know what the difference is from the beginning. One of the first things I wanted to also look at is just some of the preferences. So in the preferences, which on my Mac here is in Dorico preferences, on PC is edit preferences. Cool. Yes, I think so. Then in the general section, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a couple of preferences that I generally have set all the time in Dorico. One is I do have follow playhead during playback on. I only mention that because some people don't want that. They want to scroll and control things manually. But I do have that one on generally, but that's where you can turn it off if you don't like it. I don't show the playhead when stopped, so that's unticked. I also don't have the open VST plugin windows when opening projects. If when you tick the box, it says when you start a new project and that kind of thing, you get the Halium window pop up by default. It probably, well, in most cases, it will be a bit quicker on your computer if it doesn't have to pop that up. And if you know that it's going to be loading samples in the background anyway, and you don't need to see it, then just untick that, and that will help speed things up a little bit. But mainly, it's just one of those windows that I don't need to really see most of the time, so I have that unticked. So if you're kind of wondering why there's a difference there, that might be it. So you can go and change those options. Also, when kind of general play shortcut things that I'll be using today, I'm just checking. So Frank said, "Is this the reason why the instrument names do not display 1, 2?" Yes, because one's a solo and one's a section, Frank. So yes, that's why they're both just saying violin at the moment. I suppose I could label one solo violin, but I haven't at the moment. So play shortcuts that I'm going to be using today, on ones that you may be using yourself, but just in case you're wondering occasionally what it is I'll be using while I'm doing things today. The first one is if you've got a note selected and you press P, as in it's the same in Sibelius as well, that it will play from that selected note or from that selected object. You can also press the spacebar. The spacebar will play from the current time. So if I press the spacebar now, it will carry on in this piece, and I press the spacebar to stop, and press the spacebar to carry on, it will carry on from that position. I also have an option for shift spacebar, which will replay from the last play position. So for example, if I said here, I've got this trumpet part here, and I want to play from there, I can press P. And then if I was doing something else, maybe over here, and had something else selected, but I then just press shift spacebar, it will replay from the last play position, which was this first trumpet note here. I know the music's not very exciting, sorry about that. And the other shortcut I use quite a lot is Alt-Shift spacebar, which is to play from the beginning of the flow, or in my case, the beginning of this piece. And that will, so there's, depending on the case, I often am using Shift spacebar or Shift Alt spacebar to play from one of those sections without having to click on the score. And once you've got a few other things open, like the mixer and things like that, sometimes it's useful not to have to go and find the score again or anything else. I do often use multiple windows when I'm doing things, but if I'm just traveling with a laptop, or today because I'm just showing you one of the screens, it's just the laptop screen, then I thought it was worth pointing out some of those. So talking about the mixer, there's a few things I think is just worth mentioning in the mixer, just because it may help you. If these are things that you already know, fantastic. If they're not, then maybe you'll pick up a couple of things today. So I pressed F3 to get to the mixer. There is a little button for it up here as well on the top right hand side, but I'm not using that. I used F3 to open and close the mixer. In our mixer, there's a few things that people, I think, often ignore. One is the plus and minus over here on the right hand side. If you press minus, then all the faders get smaller. So if you need to fit more faders on the screen, just press minus. And if you press plus, then they get bigger. So if you want more space for any of these, to see the names better, or just to see what's going on various screen resolutions, then press plus and minus. Another thing that you may or may not be using, and possibly should be really, when you're doing things like muting and soloing things. So I can solo individual instruments here. There's these buttons, a big M and a big S, and this deactivates all mutes and all solos. So if I've got something muted, and especially if when you have a lot of faders and things open, sometimes it's more useful just to press this button, which will deactivate any mutes or any solos, so that you can hear everything again if you're not sure what's going on. These buttons at the top, you may or may not use very much, but we'll have a quick look at these. I know we've looked at them before. I've mentioned sends before because we have automatically in every project sent some of everything to the reverb channel at the end. And this is our reverb fader. And you can tell that because if you use this little drop down, then it's going to the reverb automatically. Now, and the power button has automatically been selected for all of those as well. So all you have to do, if you want to add some reverb to a piece, is, and you don't need this send, you don't need the send section on, you just need the insert section on. We've automatically added reverb here as in this insert section. So, and there's various effects you can add, but reverb is added by default. All you have to do is press the power button, and it will automatically turn on the reverb. If you want to edit the reverb, and I have looked at this before in one of the other videos, but just press the little E, and you'll get this window pop up, which I opened on my other screen. And this is the reverb interface. And don't worry about all of the options and things in here. Just use the browse button and choose the type of reverb you want. There's all sorts of options that we've looked at before. Just choose tunnel because it's a really obvious thing. Then you'll know it's working and you'll know you're getting somewhere because you've added things. You then added effect and you can hear it working. So if you add that, then your piece will then have reverb on it, and you don't need to do anything else. So it just makes things feel a bit more lifelike. And sometimes if you're not, if you're thinking, oh, it sounds a bit dead, or sometimes actually if the samples aren't fantastic for some of the instruments, sometimes reverb can help cure that as well. Now, you can also add effects to individual instruments. So for each instrument, there's 4 slots. So it may be that you say, on this trumpet, I would like to add an amp simulator, and maybe I would like to add a ping pong delay. So maybe your trumpet player plays in Snarky Puppy or something, and you kind of want to get close to that. So I'm just going to close that for a second. So on my trumpet part down here now this may sound slightly bizarre now to some of you. And all of these effects, you see the ping pong delay is possibly a bit much. You can change any of these, so I can come into my amp simulator and change the sound of that. I'm just going to move it off the screen for a second. So if we play again from the same section. So you can, and I know lots of people will be thinking, oh, that's a horrible noise, I don't like that. But if you want to play with some of these things and some of these effects, have a play with some of them. Some of them are useful, maybe not the ping pong delay right now, let's turn that off. But some of them may well be useful, just to add reverb to individual things or to everything as a whole, but just so you know that those kind of things exist. And if you're want to make it sound a bit more like it will in real life, especially if anybody does have any effects and things on instruments, then you may want to do those. Now, I appreciate that those particular effects, it was an odd case, but just so you know that they're there. Now, other buttons and things that exist on here, you can turn various things off. So, for example, if I just show you everything on here, if I press these output button, then my output section goes away. If you generally don't need it, and you want that bit of space back, you can turn it off. The effects, master effects one at the end, you can turn that off. You can also turn off all the VST instruments if you want to. So if you don't want to see all of those and you only want the master effect just in a little mixer window, then you can do that. There's also an option which is normally turned off, which is for MIDI over here on the right-hand side. Now we'll come back and use that one when we look at kind of outputs to other things later on. But that's just so you know, it's kind of, because it's not on by default, a lot of people have missed it and don't realize it's there. So some of the other play things, let's go into play mode in here. So now I'm sure you've used play mode for various things before. Oh, by the way, if you need to expand a bunch of these instruments at the same time, if you hold down Command or Control and then click on them, then you can expand a few of them all at the same time if that's useful. Obviously, I can expand each one. I can choose the bottom here. I'm just going to choose the bottom here of this violin part. I was going to highlight it with the mouse, but it's not working. Mouse pointer not working. There we go. So just down here, you can see my pointer changes, and then I can use that to drag this up and down so I can change things. You can also do things like if you want to zoom in and out of here, you can use the regular shortcuts. So you can use Z and you can use X if you want to zoom in and out. You can drag around. I'm using a trackpad, so I can use a 2-finger scroll to move this around. You can also pinch and zoom in here if you want to. And also, if you're using a mouse and you feel like you need a bit more control and only zoom in one direction, then if you shift click on this piano over here, then you can zoom in and out effectively that way. And if you alt click, and you actually drag up and down, so I'm holding down alt, clicking up here, and dragging down or up, and you can change the ruler up there as well. And when you click in the ruler up here, that will set the play pointer. So if I just click up here and press play, that's where it will play from in this particular case. There's also some options for 1.2 here where there's now a new pencil tool. So if you want to draw in notes now, then you can draw them in and just draw them directly into play mode, which might be useful in a lot of cases. So this is where you may want to expand so you can see all of the notes individually a bit clearer, so that you know exactly where you're drawing. And this will then write the notes in on the piece. And depending on how long you drag these notes, as you can see, it will put in the notes accordingly and notate them accordingly. Also, I don't have any drums down here at the moment, but if I'd added a drum instrument, there's also this beta, so you can draw in percussion. So you get a percussion grid, and you can draw in the percussion down there as well if you want to. So just in some cases, if you're in this mode, just before you could only edit the existing notes, and you could edit the sound, or you can edit the notation of those notes. Now, if you need to, you can draw objects in as well, so that may well be useful. Now, what a lot of people have been asking about recently, or just getting confused about, is kind of, I suppose, how things can be hooked up, changed, edited, how you can use other sample libraries and things like that. So I said that in this case, we'd started off, we had some players, we had solo and section players. So in play mode, if I press this little E on the right-hand side for the Halion interface, so this is to edit it, then this window pops up, which I'm sure you've seen before. And you'll notice in here that the solo violin combi has been selected for the first violin, and then we've got the violins 1A combi. So that's a section sound that's been loaded in there. We've got trumpet combi, and we've got trumpets tutti combi. So that's the difference, where Dorico is by default picking a different sound, whether it's a solo or a section instrument now, which is a more recent change. However, if you don't like it, if you want to change them, or if you've got an existing piece that you want to change, for all of these, you can open the all of these instruments, and you can choose what you want. I recommend just typing into here, for example, violin in the search, and then you can scroll down the list and find any of these violins. You can load one into here, so you can decide you'd like this one, and then you can play it on this keyboard down here to see if that's the sound you'd like. If you don't like it, you can go back to here. Your filter will already be there, so you can search for a different violin. It's sometimes worth also checking to see if there's something you want that's called strings instead, because it's doing it by name. Or you can, if you want to, look down the list and search by category. So you can look at the category of everything and do it that way if you wish. So obviously there's an awful lot of instruments in this place, in this section, but then you'll know whether it's in the strings section, whether it's an individual or a combined string sound. So search or filter however you want to choose the sounds from there. So in that way, if you don't like the particular instrument that we're using, for a lot of the instruments in Halion, there are other choices, and you can choose one of the other choices in there. I know some people have said actually they like some of the GM sounds even in Halion, and they would prefer to use some of those. So you can search in here and then search for a violin. For example, here's the GM violin, or if it was the piano or anything else that you wanted to use. So that's kind of changing some of the sounds in here. Just while I think about it, in this options section, there's also some options for how things are working in Halion, and if you're getting any dropouts or any issues, then it may be, for example, that this multi-core section, it's not using all the cores on your computer. And if you make sure you're using the maximum number of cores, that may help. It may be that the balance between disk or RAM, you may need to tweak that depending on how much disk or RAM space there is on your computer. I won't go into all of the options there, but just know that this option section does exist. And in some cases, maybe if you contact support, or you contact me or somebody on Facebook, they might mention this this particular section to help you out depending on your specs of your computer. Actually, in one case also this week, somebody was using a sound and it wasn't in the right octave for what they needed. So they changed the sound up here, and they'd also changed the octave tuning section here so that they could change the octave up or down for what they needed. So there are individual tweaks and things that you can do in here. And then when you have made those changes and you save the project, the Dorico project, those options are going to be saved with the project. So you don't need to worry about having to make those again next time you open the project. They'll be saved with the project. And I'll come on to kind of what you do for new projects at the end as well. I was just having a look in the list of questions. Hello from various places around the world. Nice. I'm not at the moment. I don't really have any news on any other new instruments or any new features. Or, for example, quantizing. There isn't really a quantize option in Dorico. However, if you're in write mode and you select a bunch of notes and use the shortcut for quaver, all of those notes will be set to quaver, for example. So in some cases, you can do some of those things. It also, if you make a selection in play mode and then use the shortcuts for extending or notes, I'll show you what I mean. So if I was, let's say for example, this note here, I can extend notes and I can shorten notes, and there's some shortcuts for those in the right menu as well. You can use those in play mode as well. So we don't have an official quantize option at the moment. I think if you're thinking about quantize type stuff, like I often have, it's probably because the project started in something like Cubase, and actually Cubase's quantize options are really good. Maybe we'll get something similar one day, but we don't have yet. So maybe quantizing Cubase first and then import a music XML or MIDI file, maybe. Depends on the case, I guess. So moving on. So we've talked about kind of some of the Halion options and some of the things you can do, just so you understand kind of how things are hooked up, I suppose, because that will make sense for the next section as well. So by default, Dorico is using Halion, so it's loading Halion samples by default. Now, if you like, just accept there's some clever magic going on in the background, which when you choose a violin solo or section, it will go and find an appropriate violin solo or section sound for that. Great. If you want to kind of change things and understand how things are hooked up, in play mode for all of the instruments that are listed, and if I expand a few more, you'll see them. It says that they're playing and they're going to Halion. So when I click on this here, that's my only option. So it's going to play through Halion, and it's playing in slot 1, and this one's playing in slot 2. There's a number 2 here, and this one will be playing in slot 3, and that corresponds to here in Halion, where we've got slots 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you add more than 16 instruments to your score, you just do that in setup mode. You just keep on adding instruments. Then Dorico will load into each slot. It will just keep going by number up to 16, and then in the VST rack, it will load a new instance here. So effectively, this plus button, it will load another option in here in the VST rack. So if you had 32 instruments, you'd have 2. If you had 33 instruments, you'd have 3, and it would have started another one as well. So if you then wanted to add something else or change something else, so for example, if I just switch to another piece, I had a question from somebody in the week about using a harp, and there isn't really a harp in the current Halion set. So what they were doing was fairly sensibly using GPO5, because that one does have a harp. So this is a piece, obviously you've seen before, I've made earlier, and just I thought it would be a handy one to use. So take one of your existing pieces, doesn't matter which one. And if, let's say, we wanted to make the piano play a harp instead, for example. So we're just going to change the sound. I'm not changing the notation. I'm not doing anything else. I'm just going to change the sound in this particular case. So I'm going to press the plus button down on the bottom right-hand side. So that's down here, so I can press plus, which has added a new item in the VST rack. And from here, I've got various options listed. Now, some of these are Steinberg options, like Groove Agent, Halion Sonic normally we use. Paggiop and Retrolog are also Steinberg options. Then we've got the ARIA Player VST listed and the ARIA Player VST Multi. Now, I'm going to show a couple of things with Garitan Personal Orchestra here, GPO5. So GPO5, I have already installed it. So I've kind of saved you you don't have to sit and to me waffle through all of that stuff. If you're interested in installing GPO5, if you already have it and you want to get it working in Dorico, then either in the Facebook group, you can get this file, it's just in the files section, or email me and I'll send you this information. There's this 4-page document on basically how to make it work and what all the expression maps are. There's the VST whitelist and there's the expression maps themselves. So this particular bit here, where it says in setup mode, sorry, to set it up, install it on your computer. You can follow their general instructions. And then you need to go to one of these locations and put in the VST to whitelist file that I can email you, or it's available to download from Facebook. Basically, that's the bit that will make the ARIA player show up in Dorico. So I'm just mentioning that in case you think it's magic. So that's the bit that you need to do. Once it's installed, as you can see here, it will show up, and then you can start using it. So to start using it, let's get that out of the way. There are two options here, ARIA Player VST and VST Multi. The basic difference is the ARIA Player VST can load a whole bunch of samples, but they will all come back into Dorico on one channel in the mixer. So in the mixer here, you'll get one channel which says out one, which is all of the stuff coming back from the ARIA Player from Garytown. If you choose the VST Multi option, which I'd recommend, then in our mixer in Dorico, then you'll get a lot more outputs. You'll get another 16 outputs. So every instrument that you add in GPO will also appear in the mixer on its own fader. That's basically the option. So choose the VST multi option because it gives you more options. Then what you'll need to do is choose the instrument or instruments that you want to use and play through that. So in here, I can now switch to the ARIA player for any particular instrument. So just that one instrument is now going to use the ARIA player. And I'm going to use slot 1. So I'm manually changing the slot number as well because I get to decide what's going to happen there. I press the little E button over here on the right-hand side. Oh, on a different screen. Here we go. So now I have here the ARIA player show up. And in slot 1, I can choose which instrument I want to use. In this particular case, I'm going to just choose a harp. So here we have a harp. So now the rest of, I'm just going to move that out of the way. The rest of all of my instruments are still, if I go and expand a few of these, they're still playing through Halion. I haven't changed anything else. I've just changed this one individual instrument to play through Garytown. I don't need to do anything else. If I play this piece from the beginning now, actually I'm just checking the mix what's going on. You see, here's my harp. If I solo that. So now I've changed the piano. No, it's still notated piano, still says piano, but the playback side of it, I've changed to use a different sample. So that will then be listed in here, and I can set everything from here and choose which sample I want to use and how it's all going to work. So that's one option. Now, it may be that you're not using GPO5, you could be using something else. So Contact will also can be listed in here. So if you load Contact in here instead, then when you press the little E button, instead you'll get Contact. So if you've got a library loaded in here, then you can choose, for example, to load some instruments from a different sample library. And you can add in your VST rack, I'm just going to move that out of the way, in your VST rack here, you can add various options. If you've got the space or the computing power to cope with it, you can add various options in here, and you can choose for each instrument what they're going to use. Now, it is a slightly manual process because at this point, you have to go and choose which sample you're going to load and where it's going to go. So this is where you need to keep track of which one it's going to go to here and which slot you're using, and then go and load that into the appropriate player. So once you get outside using Halion stuff, it is a bit more manual. You have to set these things up. So it will help in a lot of cases. If I just switch back to my ARIA player, some instruments have what they call key switches. Now, I know some people at this point are going to switch off. Basically, an instrument like a violin might be able to switch to spiccato and have a different sample. A trumpet, if you write mute on the score, will switch to mute. So, for example, in our expression maps here, if I choose some of these, you'll see the English horn, the HSO, Halion Symphonic Orchestra, English horn has natural and staccato, and that gets set up automatically. But what happens if you want to use something else? So if you want to use GPO5, again, the file I can send you, you can use the import library button. This is in the instructions, as I said before. And in the expression map, there's a wind, brass, strings expression map. All this does is load into here a load of GPO options that you can now choose from if you want to. Now, only because this one I found was a bit odd, I'll explain this one a bit further. If I wanted my violin to use GPO, so I've got my ARIA player listed here. I can say I want you to use the ARIA player, and you can use slot 2. So then in my ARIA player, I'm going to do this the long way so that we can all see what's going on. I can say, I would like you to use in slot 2, I would like you to use a, solo and section strings. Interesting. Okay. Okay. We've got a number of options. One's KS, Lush, Lush Mutes, Pizzicato, and various other options. KS will be the key switch version. So that violin, if I load that one, will have options. So it's got options for key switches as well as its standard sounds. So what I've done is, and this is in, like I said, it's in the file which includes all the instructions. I've listed the expression map list. So if you've chosen a sound, which is the violin's one key switch from the section strings, you'll need the GPO strings section expression map, which means in Dorico, you press this little cog here, which is the for endpoints, and you say that in slot 2, because I'm using slot 2 down here on the left-hand side, I want to use, see, I've loaded them in now. I've got a load of GPO options as well as HSO options. GPO's Garritown Personal Orchestra, HSO Halen Symphonic Orchestra. So I want to use the GPO strings section because that will have the right key switches in it for the sample I've selected. And just because it was an interesting case. For example, if you look at the brass section options, depending on which patch you load, is it the Sam trumpet patch or is it a trumpet 1 player 1 key switch patch? You'll need to use a different expression map name. So you need to choose a different option because they all have slightly different key switch options that they can use according to the GPO manual. So I've set those up. If you find any problems with them, please let me know. But I've set those up so that you can use those. And that was that particular case was a sample library that a number of people are asking me for, and was one I was able to then get hold of to try out some of these and test them. So you can set all of these bits up manually, but like I said, you are doing things relatively manually at this point. You have to load the right sample, and if there's a key switch map for it, that's a useful option. For the piano that I loaded to start off with, you don't need a key switch for the harp because there aren't any other harp samples or anything else that involves a key switch. So I didn't need to do that. But for some instruments, like I said, with violin, maybe they go to spiccato, or some violins have a muted violin sound, or the trumpets have a mute sound, and those kind of things, then you'll need to also have an expression map for the key switches in there. I was also asked recently, and this on a similar vein. In fact, I'm just going to go back to the first file we had open. So my lovely project that Frank said, I think you've stolen that from somebody else, Scales of C. And you see that we're just loading the samples in there, so I'll close that. Somebody asked me and said, but I would quite like to use a MIDI instrument, an external MIDI instrument. Now, a little while ago in a version of Dorico, we added this MIDI instrument section down here. So what you'll do is you press the plus button. And so in this instrument rack here, you now have a MIDI instruments option. And presuming you have a MIDI instrument attached, and I should say that you need to attach them before you start Dorico. So attach any USB interfaces, anything else you have that you want to do MIDI, then start Dorico, then they will show up in this list here. So I've got there's a Mac driver bus, don't worry about that one. I happen to have a Reface Yamaha keyboard plugged in, so that's here. I've got a Steinberg UR22 interface, and that has MIDI in and out on the back as well. I also have a Yamaha Bluetooth interface because the keyboard I'm attaching was a bit too far away than the MIDI cables, so I've attached that one by Bluetooth. It happens to be behind me. You can't see I'm pointing, but I am. So if I say I'm going to use that Bluetooth interface, that Bluetooth interface is currently plugged into a fairly old Yamaha Motif because it does general MIDI. So now I'm going to send an instrument to over there, to the Bluetooth adapter. So you choose your instrument. So for example, I'll just take this violin and I'll send this now to my Bluetooth adapter. So that's now the violin is going to play out via MIDI. And I can choose a slot. These are effectively MIDI channels now, 1 to 16. Now, what you'll find with sample libraries is that when you save the project, it remembers all the information. So it remembers which samples were loaded in which players. So when you reload the project, they're all there. With MIDI, that might not happen because it needs to have the right MIDI patch. So if it's useful to you, then email me and I'll send you a general MIDI expression map, which is a bit of a cheat possibly, but this wasn't really what they were originally designed for, I don't think. So I've got a general MIDI option here. So I've imported a general MIDI bunch of instruments. Now all this does is, so for example, for my violin, I've set the natural to be a program change of 42, which is the general MIDI violin. So there's also pizzicato and tremolo because they also exist in MIDI. So they're different program changes, 47 and 46 respectively. So this means that if I just press OK, for this violin in slot 1, I go down here on the right-hand side to my MIDI instruments and I press the cog down here. How many MIDI channels? At the moment, I've only got one, but you could say you've got a couple if you're going to be using more instruments. I'm not going to be using percussion on either of those two channels. And the expression map I'm going to use is going to be a general MIDI one. So I'll go through my list of general MIDI and I'll change to violin. That's selected. So now this will, when I press play, it will send a MIDI patch controller change to my MIDI keyboard as you'd expect. But it means that if I then switch to another project, then it could switch all of those instruments on my MIDI synth. And then if I come back to this project, it will switch them all back again. Otherwise, you'd have to do it all manually each time, which would be a bit annoying. So if this would be useful to you, email me. There might be a slight delay with Christmas, and I haven't finished the documentation for that bit just to kind of explain it all. But if it would be useful to you, drop me an email, and then you can refer back to this video and see how to set those up. I should point out that if you then use the export audio option, anything that you've sent out as MIDI isn't going to come back as audio, so it wouldn't be in your MP3 file that you've made. And also, I said at the beginning that there's MIDI faders here. So now in my mixer, when I enable this MIDI option, I now have some MIDI faders, so I can now change the volume if I need to and adjust the balance between my MIDI instruments and the sampled instruments that I've got all in the same mixer. So just because it may have a piano and you really like the piano sound on that piano, it's what you're used to hearing, and that's what you want to use. You can just say in your project, everything else is going to use a sample, but the piano is going to play through my nice piano or whatever instrument you've got. So it's just another useful option. Yes, you may then find that you need a mixer or something else to bring all the sounds back together through your speakers and that kind of thing. Well, I'm not going to go into all of those options at the moment, but just to know that if you need to send things out to a MIDI device, you can. That's how you'll do it. And if it's useful, I can send you a GM expression map that will help with some of those changes when you switch projects. Now, for switching projects, yeah, we don't really at the moment in Dorico have a template option. And the annoying thing is that once you've set everything up and you've spent all this time putting the expression maps in and saying, this is my favorite violin from this sample library, and this is my favorite trumpet from this sample library, you want that on the next project as well. So either one day set up effectively a template for yourself, set up a blank project, which has everything mapped in all the right directions, then just do save as and save that as your favorite template file, your project start file, and start from there in the future. If you've already worked on a bunch of things and they've already got notes in, obviously like my beautiful piece here, and you want to say, actually, this is the beginning, this is where I'd like to start from in the future. So I've added I've added ARIA player, and I've got some things playing through MIDI. I've got some things playing through the ARIA player in a different slot. If you set all of these things up, then what you should do is go to setup mode. Obviously, not in the project you're using. Do a save as, or do this in the copy of the file, because then if you click on the flow and delete it, it will delete all of the music from the file, but all of your instruments and all of the setup is still there. So now when I press plus for the flow here, I've now got a new blank project to start with, and all of the stuff in play mode is automatically assigned. So my violin's still going out through MIDI, the second violin's still going out through the ARIA player, and everything else is going out through Halion. So effectively, I've got my start point. And that's one of the biggest things that will start people off. And people who have template files for Sibelius and things like that, it may be that you want to change the look and the paper size and everything else. But also, if you set up the playback side of things, it means that you don't have to go and find all your favorite samples next time. So either set up a blank project, or like I said, take the project that's got all the right sounds in it, make sure it's a copy, delete the flow, and then you've effectively got your blank template to start from for the future. So sorry for rattling on a bit. I'm just going to check the comments just to see for a second. Hang on a second. Talk amongst yourselves. There was a question about VSL. I've been asked recently about VSL, East West, and you notice I had a Spitfire library in there as well. I've also been asked about the marching band and the jazz and big band templates and various other ones. I'm starting to collate some information to make some expression maps for other libraries. As Paul has just said in some of the comments, there are some limitations for some of the combinations of playing techniques and things. That means in some sample libraries you wouldn't be able to do all of the options that they have. But I'm aiming to start at least doing some of these. There are some Cubase ones, which are in some cases a good start to use. And when we're looking at expression maps, so you're in play mode and you go to expression maps, you can import a Cubase expression map if you already have one. What would be really handy is to know not only which libraries are people most interested in, as to which one we should look at first, but has anybody already done one? If you've already done one, or you've got partway there and you'd like other people to also work on it, then maybe use the Facebook group or send it to me if you like, so that we can share a lot of these things and share expression maps. I can't install all of them at the same time. I don't think anybody can, because you need so much hard drive space to install them all. So if we can start sharing some of these expression maps, that would be great. Obviously, the forum would be a great place to share them as well. So whatever social option you prefer, you can get in touch with me or the team and share expression maps. That would be very useful, and other people can then obviously help with setting a lot of these things up. Somebody also asked about Note Performer. Obviously we know Note Performer is very popular. There are a couple of things that we still need to set up at our end, so that Wallander can do, or Arnie can do the things that they need to do for Note Performer. So maybe one day, I'm not promising anything, I don't know any details or anything else, but yes, we are looking into it, but we don't have anything right now. The idea of today's session was to say, here's all the things you can currently do now. So over Christmas, you can take one of your one of the projects you've worked on, or one of our example projects, and you can start playing with some of the effects on there. Just have a play and see how they work, so that next time you need them, you know they're there. If you do have another sample library that you want to use, you could start to look at some of those options and how you might just take one instrument and map it to a different sample library, so that you know how it works. And you can refer back to this video, hopefully, and then work out how all of those things work. Let me just see if there's any other. Here we go. Somebody asked about Rewire. Yes, we will also be looking at things like Rewire. We do have the same audio engine as Cubase, so for a direct connection to Cubase, maybe one day we won't need Rewire because we can do something more direct. I'm guessing. I know Paul's online, so I'm slightly scared about saying anything because he would know far more than I would. We are looking into it. Obviously, for other for other connections, then Rewire would be useful anyway. So yes, we are also looking at some of those options. So the Garitan Jazz Band library, it would work the same way, but you may need, well, for some instruments, obviously you'd need a different expression map. I haven't read the manual for that one yet to see how much crossover there is. We don't yet have a controller lane, so if you wanted to draw in expression options in play mode, there isn't one yet. No, I can't make it work either. Maybe one day. Orchestral, so there's some people asking for things that they'd like, so I'll make some notes after this session from the comments that are on there as well. And oops, sorry, that's just skipped. Hang on a second. Yes, I agree with Ian. It seems a shame for everyone to recreate the same expression maps for popular libraries if there could be a collaborative effort? Absolutely. So there isn't one place for that yet. So use whichever you prefer. Facebook, the forum, I'll try and keep an eye on all of them, and we'll collate some of these so that if we can make them available, we can make some more expression maps available for some of these other sample libraries. So I'm sure you've got things that you need to do and last minute shopping, although it's only the 20th, so you've got a good few days yet to do last minute bits of shopping if you're that way inclined for Christmas. The next session, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I will now be at NAM, so if you're going to be at NAM in January, come and say hello, please. But it does mean that these sessions on Wednesdays at this time would be tricky because I won't be here. I'll either be on a plane or somewhere else. So maybe I'll do a poll and say, do you want a session in January and what day? We'll have to figure that out, I think. And yes, we'll have to work that one out as to which date that will be. Love to do one. So and of course, let me know what you would like to talk about next. So get in touch by email at discoverdorico@steinberg.de. Use also, of course, the Facebook groups, so you can have a look on there and you can comment on there as well. You can comment on this video if you want on YouTube. Tell me what you'd like to see next. Email me at any time during the month. Discover Dorico, it's all one word. discoverdorico@steinberg.de. And let me know what you'd like to talk about. There is a new 30-day trial, so if you've tried a previous 30-day trial, and we now have a new one for Dorico 1.2. So if you've already tried it, you should have had an email, I think, by now that says, "Hey, look, here's a new code. Try this out. It's a new demo for 30 days." If you go to dorico.com and you've not tried the demo before, then you can download the demo from there. And then basically that's it from me. So happy hollybobs. I hope you get some time off. Have a play with things. Obviously, let us know if you get stuck. Facebook and the forum are great places, even over Christmas. If I'm a bit slower on email, I apologize over Christmas. But the community is also very good at answering questions. So yeah, thank you for listening. Any questions and to know what to talk about in the future, please let me know. Thank you. Bye.